My name is Linda. I'm 36 years old, and until recently, I was married to Michael, 39. We'd been together for over a decade, 12 years of shared dinners, laughter, road trips, holidays, and all the little routines that made up our life. From the outside, we probably looked solid, stable, maybe even enviable. But inside, at least for me, something was slipping. I couldn't name it at first. It wasn't that Michael was a bad husband. In fact, most women would probably be grateful for someone like him. He worked hard, he was responsible, and he loved me in his own steady, dependable way. But over the years, I started to feel like I was disappearing into the role of wife. My identity wasn't mine anymore, it was tied to what I was for him, for us, for our marriage. And the one place where this became the clearest was in our intimacy. Michael and I had always been passionate in the early years. We had the kind of connection where even a small touch on the shoulder would send sparks through me. But over time it became routine, almost mechanical. We'd fall into bed after long days, do what we had to do, and then sleep. There was love, yes. But I started to wonder if the love was real, or if it was just muscle memory. That's when I stumbled upon voices online that made me question everything. At first it was harmless. A podcast here, a blog post there, women talking about reclaiming their identities, about how society conditions us to believe sex is the glue of marriage, when in fact it can sometimes be a crutch that hides deeper issues. I started reading more, listening more. Soon I was hooked. One woman in particular, Aria, had this magnetic way of speaking about higher connection and emotional partnership. She talked about how couples could rediscover themselves by removing the expectation of sex altogether, how it forced you to face what was underneath. I don't know why her words resonated so deeply, but they did. And one day, after weeks of building this in my head, I finally said it out loud. I walked into the living room where Michael was half watching TV and scrolling his phone. My heart was pounding. I'd rehearsed the line in my head so many times. We need to talk. He muted the TV immediately and looked at me, concerned. I swallowed, my hands crossed tightly over my chest. I think we should try a sexless marriage. His reaction was instant, he laughed. Not because he thought it was funny, but because he thought it had to be a joke. What is this? A request for divorce, he said, chuckling nervously. But I wasn't joking. I kept my face serious. I'm serious, Michael. The smile dropped from his face. What the hell are you talking about? And just like that, I realized how far apart we already were. I tried to explain. I told him how I'd been thinking about it, how I'd been listening to new ideas, how maybe intimacy wasn't everything, that maybe taking it off the table could help us grow stronger as partners, not just lovers. I told him it wasn't about punishing him, it was about finding us again. But Michael looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Where is this coming from? He demanded. Are you unhappy? Did I do something wrong? I shook my head. No, it's not about that. It's about figuring out who we are without leaning on physical connection as a crutch. That word, crutch, set him off. I saw the anger flicker in his eyes. He fired back, saying our intimacy wasn't a crutch. It was love. It was what held us together. I remember sitting there on the couch, watching the man I'd shared a bed with for 12 years look at me like I was insane. And maybe I was. But in that moment, I felt more conviction than doubt. He asked if I'd been reading blogs, listening to influencers. I admitted I had. His voice got sharper, mocking. He told me I was letting strangers online brainwash me. You're not even willing to consider it, I said softly. No, I'm not, he snapped back. And in that silence that followed, I realized we weren't on the same side anymore. The days after that conversation were strange, surreal almost. Michael expected me to laugh it off, to say it was a phase, to go back to normal. But I didn't, because I couldn't. Once I'd opened that door in my head, I couldn't close it again. I started spending more time with my phone, with my earbuds in, listening to voices that echoed the things I felt but couldn't explain to Michael. I heard lines like, "The value of a woman doesn't lie in her ability to please a man." I remember him walking in one day, while I was listening. He asked casually, "Interesting stuff?" I just shrugged. That shrug wasn't like me. I used to share everything with him. But now it felt like he wouldn't understand. Soon, even little things about me started to shift. My clothes, for example. I stopped wearing the cozy sweatpants and tees I usually lived in. Instead, I put on crisp, professional clothes, even if I wasn't going anywhere. Maybe it was silly, but it made me feel like I was in control again, like I was someone. Michael noticed. "You look nice," he said one morning. "Thanks," I replied quickly, brushing past him. I didn't want to explain. The truth was, I felt like I was building a wall between who I had been as Michael's wife and who I was trying to become. Our conversations became shorter. He'd ask about my day. I'd give one-word answers. He'd try to joke. I'd just nod. And when he pushed harder, I'd snap at him. "You wouldn't understand." The thing was, I wasn't sure I understood myself either. Then one evening, I showed him a post from Aria. It was about how intimacy wasn't necessary for a fulfilling relationship, how removing it could allow for spiritual growth. "What do you think?" I asked. He stared at me, horrified. "I think it's a load of crap," he said flatly. That moment broke something inside me. Because to me, it wasn't crap. It was hope. He called it brainwashing. He said I wasn't acting like myself anymore. Maybe he was right. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was trying to find myself. But the more I tried, the further away from Michael I seemed to drift. I didn't realize it at the time, but my marriage was unraveling. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I even wanted to stop it. First update. After that night when Michael dismissed Aria's post as crap, something inside me hardened. It wasn't that I stopped loving him, it was that I stopped believing he could ever see what I was seeing. He was stuck in his way of thinking, and I was drifting somewhere else. I didn't plan for it to be this way. I didn't wake up one day and decide to push my husband away. But that's what happened, slowly and quietly, until the space between us felt like an ocean. Michael noticed right away, though he tried not to show it. Every time my phone buzzed, his eyes would flick toward me. Every time I disappeared into the office with my laptop, he'd linger in the hallway like he wanted to ask questions but couldn't bring himself to. I started locking my phone. That was new. For years, we'd been open with everything, passwords, accounts, even leaving our devices on the counter without worry. But I needed privacy now, or at least that's what I told myself. This wasn't about hiding an affair, it wasn't, but it was about carving out a space where I could breathe without him watching. I joined a private online group where women like me shared their experiences about finding themselves outside the expectations of marriage. It felt liberating to hear stories that mirrored my own. They weren't all about sexless marriages, but they were about freedom, about not being defined by your role as someone's partner. And that's where I grew closer to Aria. She wasn't just some faceless influencer anymore. She was a real person who replied to my messages, who encouraged me when I doubted myself, who told me I was brave for even considering something so radical. "Thanks for your advice earlier," I typed one night after a long back and forth. It really helped me see things clearly. Her response came almost immediately. "You inspire me, Linda. You're stronger than you know." Reading those words made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt with Michael in years. It wasn't romantic, not really, but it was intimate. Emotional intimacy that I craved but couldn't find at home anymore. Meanwhile, Michael grew restless. One evening, I was scrolling through messages when he walked into the room. I quickly locked my phone, and I saw the suspicion in his eyes. "Who are you always talking to?" he asked casually, trying to sound nonchalant. "Just a couple of women from a support group I found online," I said, forcing a smile. "What kind of support group? Why do you care?" I snapped, sharper than I intended. His face tightened. "Because you're talking to them more than me. Do they know more about our marriage than I do?" The words stung, because they were true. And instead of answering, I just got up and left the room. That night, lying in bed next to him, I could feel the tension radiating off his body. He was awake, I knew it, staring at the ceiling just like I was. But neither of us said a word. It went on like this for days, silent suspicion from him, guarded secrecy from me. And the more I pulled away, the more he tried to grasp tighter, like holding sand in his hands. Then one evening, it all came to a head. We were in the kitchen after dinner. I asked him if he could do the dishes while I caught up with my group online. Normally, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But something in his tone changed when he answered. Sure, he said flatly. While you go lock yourself in the office and talk to people who seem to know more about you than I do. I froze, plate in hand, and turned to him. What's that supposed to mean? He put down the glass he was drying and faced me fully, his frustration boiling over. It means you've been shutting me out. You spend all your time on your phone, listening to these ridiculous ideas, and then you tell me we should stop being intimate like it's some kind of life hack. Do you even hear how insane that sounds? My face burned with anger. I'm not shutting you out. I've been trying to talk to you for weeks, but every time I do, you dismiss me. You call it insane. You make me feel like I'm crazy for wanting more than just the same routine over and over again. More than what? He shot back. More than what we've built together? More than the connection that makes us more than roommates? Is that what's so disposable to you? I clenched my fists, trying to keep my voice calm. I'm saying intimacy doesn't have to define us. It's not the only way to connect. And who told you that? He spat. One of your influencers? Arya, maybe? The sound of her name on his lips made my blood run cold. My mouth dropped open. You went through my messages? He didn't deny it. His eyes were burning with accusation. Yeah, I did. Because I don't recognize you anymore, Linda. I'm trying to figure out who the hell I'm even married to. My heart twisted with a mix of fury and betrayal. You violated my privacy, I whispered, my voice trembling. And you violated our marriage, he shot back, the moment you decided some stranger online had better advice about us than I do. The argument exploded from there. We shouted over each other, words we couldn't take back flying like knives. He called me brainwashed. I called him controlling. He said I was selfish. I said he was insecure. And for the first time in 12 years, I wasn't sure if we were even talking about the same marriage anymore. The night ended with me storming into the office, slamming the door, clutching my phone like it was a lifeline. My hands shook as I messaged Arya, though I didn't even know what to say. All I knew was that the man I'd promised forever to now felt like a stranger. And I couldn't shake the terrifying thought that maybe, just maybe, I was becoming a stranger to him too. Second update. The night Michael confronted me about Arya left a crack in our marriage that I don't think could ever be sealed again. I remember sitting in the office afterward, my hands shaking, my heart racing, and the sound of his angry voice still echoing in my ears. Yes, I had grown close to Arya online. Yes, I trusted her words more than I trusted my husband's at that moment. But no, I hadn't cheated. Not in the way Michael suspected. And yet, the way he looked at me, like I was already guilty, already unfaithful, made me wonder if there was even a point in defending myself anymore. The days after that fight were suffocating. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was only about necessities. I'm heading out. Dinner's in the fridge. Can you take out the trash? It was like living with a ghost. I'd catch him watching me sometimes, his jaw tight, his eyes filled with questions he didn't ask. And I buried myself deeper into my phone, into Arya's words, into the group where women told me I wasn't crazy for feeling lost. But part of me hated myself for it. One evening, he broke the silence. I was at the kitchen table scrolling through posts when he sat down across from me. His voice was flat but steady. I want to try counseling. I blinked at him. Counseling? Yes. If this marriage is going to work, we need help. We're not fixing this on our own. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed, my walls shooting up. You think a stranger is going to fix us? Maybe. Maybe not. But it's better than sitting here waiting for the next fight. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him I didn't need therapy, that I just needed space, that he was the one who couldn't handle change. But looking into his tired eyes, I realized this was his last attempt. His olive branch. So I sighed and said, I'll think about it. A week later, we were sitting in a therapist's office. I felt stiff, out of place. The room smelled faintly of lavender, a diffuser humming in the corner, and the therapist's calm eyes darted between us like she was studying two different species. Michael went first. He unloaded everything. The shock of my sexless marriage idea, the distance, the secrecy, Arya. His words came out sharp, raw, full of hurt. And then it was my turn. I spoke softer, but no less honestly. I feel like I've lost myself in this marriage. Like I've spent so many years being who he needed me to be that I don't even know who I am anymore. Michael's face crumpled, like I had punched him. I knew he wanted to defend himself, but the therapist stopped him. "Let her finish," she said gently. So, I kept going. I admitted how the self-help voices online had given me language for feelings I couldn't express. How I wasn't sure intimacy was the problem, but it was the most visible symptom. How I wasn't trying to punish him, but to figure out who I was without being defined by us. The therapist asked him how he felt hearing that. He looked at me, his voice quiet but breaking. "It feels like she's already given up on us. Like this is her way of easing out of the marriage without saying it." "That's not true," I said quickly, meeting his eyes for the first time in weeks. "I haven't given up. I need time to figure myself out." "And what am I supposed to do in the meantime?" he asked, his voice rising despite the therapist's intervention. "Wait around while you decide if I'm worth staying married to?" I couldn't answer that, because deep down, I didn't know the answer myself. The session ended with the therapist giving us tools for communication, boundaries, space. Michael looked exhausted. I felt hollow. For a while, we went through the motions. We attended more sessions. We tried to talk more, to listen more, but every time, I found myself speaking about my journey, about finding myself. Michael would sit there, jaw tight, asking where he fit in that picture. And the truth was, I didn't know. One night after a session, he finally asked the question I'd been dreading. "Do you even want this to work?" I hesitated for just a second too long. He saw it in my face. "I don't know," I admitted. "I think I do, but I can't make any promises." His expression was like watching glass shatter. I could practically hear his heart breaking in the silence that followed. He nodded, but his whole body seemed to fold in on itself. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to his uneven breathing beside me. I wanted to reach for him. I wanted to tell him I was sorry, that I was confused, that I didn't mean to hurt him like this. But my hand wouldn't move. My mouth wouldn't open. Because the truth was, I didn't know if it would be a lie. I didn't know if I wanted to save us anymore, or if I wanted to save myself first. Final update. After that night in the therapist's office when I admitted I couldn't promise anything, something inside our marriage broke for good. I could see it in Michael's face. He had been clinging to the hope that counseling would fix us, that if he just tried hard enough, I would come back to him. But after my hesitation, his hope turned into something else, resignation. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Not the kind of silence that used to feel comfortable, the kind where you could sit side by side reading or watching TV and still feel connected. This silence was suffocating. It was the sound of two people trapped in the same house, but living in completely different worlds. Michael stopped asking me questions. He stopped pressing me about my phone, my group, or Aria. In some ways, that should have been a relief. But it wasn't, because the absence of his questions meant the absence of his fight. And that terrified me. One evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, typing into one of the support group forums. I barely noticed Michael sitting across from me until he cleared his throat. "We need to talk," he said. My stomach dropped. Those words felt like a mirror of the day I had said them to him. Except this time, I knew it wouldn't end with laughter or confusion. This time it was final. "What about?" I asked cautiously. "About us," he said, his voice steady but cold. "About where this is going. Because I can't do this anymore." I closed my laptop slowly and folded my hands over it, bracing myself. "What do you mean?" "I mean I need an answer, Linda," he said. "Are you in this marriage or not? Because right now, it feels like you've got one foot out the door, and I'm the idiot holding it open for you." His words cut deep, but they weren't wrong. "That's not fair." I tried to defend myself. "You know this isn't easy for me either." "Isn't it?" he shot back. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been prioritizing everything except us. Your podcasts, your influencers, your journey. None of it seems to include me." I opened my mouth to argue, but my voice cracked. "That's not true." Then prove it, he said, leaning forward, his eyes burning into mine. Show me you still care about this marriage. Show me I matter. I couldn't answer him. I stared down at my hands, lips pressed into a thin line, the silence stretching between us until it felt unbearable. Finally, I whispered, I don't know if I can. His chair scraped against the floor as he leaned back, exhaling like I'd just delivered the final blow. How much more time do you need, Linda? Weeks? Months? Years? Because I'm done waiting. I need an answer now. I can't give you that, I said, barely above a whisper. And that was it. That was the moment I knew it was over. He stood up, his face pale but firm. Then I guess that's my answer. I'm done fighting for something you don't even know if you want. Tears stung my eyes as I looked at him, but I didn't stop him when he walked away. I didn't run after him or beg him to stay. I just sat there, frozen, my hands trembling on the laptop I no longer had the courage to open. That night, he slept in the guest room. I lay in our bed alone, staring at the ceiling, waiting for him to come back. Part of me hoped the door would open, that he'd crawl back into bed and hold me like he used to, that he'd tell me we could still fix this. But the door never opened. The next morning, he left early, without a word. I spent the whole day pacing the house, trying to figure out what to say, how to repair the damage if it was even possible. But by the time he came home, I could tell he had already made his decision. I think we need to separate, he said quietly that evening. I stared at him, my throat dry, my heart pounding. And then, almost against my will, I nodded. Maybe that's for the best. And just like that, 12 years of marriage ended. No screaming, no begging, no dramatic ultimatums. Just two exhausted people who had nothing left to give. The days after the separation felt surreal. I moved through the house like a ghost, packing small things into boxes, avoiding the spaces that held the heaviest memories. The bed we once shared. The kitchen where we laughed over burnt pancakes. The couch where we used to curl up during movie nights. All of it felt like artifacts from another life, a life that belonged to someone else. People always imagine marriages end in flames, an affair discovered, a betrayal exposed, a dramatic fight that blows everything apart. Ours ended in silence, in the absence of certainty, in the simple but devastating words, I don't know if I can. I still don't know if I made the right choice. Some nights, I convinced myself I did, that I needed to find myself, that staying in a marriage built on confusion would have been a greater betrayal. Other nights, I wake up in the dark, reaching for him out of habit, only to remember he isn't there. And the guilt swallows me whole. Our story didn't end with infidelity or hatred. It ended because I stopped knowing how to be his wife without losing myself. And maybe that's the cruelest ending of all. The end.